Welcome to Conflict Managed. I'm your host, Mary Brown. Conflict Managed is a weekly podcast about toxic work environments and how to fix them. We're glad you're here. Good morning, Ben, and welcome to Conflict Managed.
Good morning, Mary. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to our conversation and what you've been doing in your coaching business and how you've been helping people find jobs and move into what it is that they want to be about. So before we get all that, I would like to hear about the first job you ever had as a young person.
Sure. So, growing up, I went to a sleepaway camp for 10 years. And in my eighth summer there, I was a counselor in training. Everyone had the option of either being a lifeguard or a waiter. You didn't have wages, but you got tipped at the end of the year, end of the summer. And it was this kind of magical opportunity to be introduced to the working world, but have all my friends around. It was honestly a pretty great first job.
Absolutely. That sounds amazing. So, a job, it was a job, not a job. I bet that it sounded relatively loose. So
Sure.
what was the management like, the direction?
Yeah, the head of the boys' side of the summer camp kind of ran things, and he was pretty strict, actually.
Mhm.
He ran a tight ship. He was dealing with teenagers. And in the moment, there were kids doing things they shouldn't have. Sometimes they got kicked out of camp or fired. And at the time, I was kind of devastated and didn't like him. But looking back, I think he did a really great job.
Yeah, it is interesting to me. I ran an ethics bowl at a high school for about 10 years, and being around high school students and hearing them talk about their teachers and being, out obviously way out of high school and thinking back, like I understand that perspective. Like when you're there, that's all you know, and you think, why is this person being this way? And of course, on the other side, I'm like, do you have any idea what they have to put up with? Yet hour after hour, year after year, and that disconnect, right? But that's why it's so lovely to have experiences and why age is a gift and we grow and we get to
Mm,
see in retrospect the good and the bad and maybe right size things and look at things in a variety of perspectives.
totally. Yeah, it's a real labor of love. I also was my first full-time job post university was as a teacher. I was a third
Hmm.
grade teacher. So dealing with the young ones, I got to see firsthand kind of the challenges of keeping this group of a lot of young people together, making sure the train's on the track and everyone's okay. It's a lot of responsibility.
Did you major in education?
I actually didn't. I was an English major,
Hmm.
creative writing. I kind of followed in my brother's footsteps in that they were both writers and artists. It's like, okay, I love to read and write, and I think I'll figure out what I should be doing, but had a hard time kind of navigating what do I do with this?
Yeah. And so you ended up teaching. Why the teaching route?
So when I left college, I was so confused about what to do.
Hmm.
My folks had moved back into New York City from upstate New York, and I was living with them in this really expensive city and trying to cobble together a full-time schedule out of part-time gigs. And I had this moment where I realized I need to commit to a path. I had tutored a lot, I had worked at summer camps, and thought maybe I should be a teacher. And here in New York, the charter schools would hire interested people as interns and would pair you with a particular grade. So I was the third grade intern. And 2 weeks into my job, it was a Tuesday. Students were getting there Thursday and Friday. Just had a pretty simple check-in with my principal. And she said to me, "So Ben, we've been talking to the third grade team because we've interviewing. A teacher had to leave for health reasons. And after seeing how you work and talking to them, we realized you're going to be the new third grade social study teacher. Congratulations." Like I'd never taught before, no degree in education. And that to this day stands as the hardest. professional experience I've ever had.
Mhm. What was hard about it?
I'm a sensitive, caring person, and I had to be really strict.
Mm,
And these were students coming from one of the poorest neighborhoods in New York City, in Brownsville, Brooklyn. When all my students were sitting at their desks, I had to say, sit up straight, fold your arms, track the speaker. This is just like regular directions that we had to give. And I get needing to have structure and
yeah.
discipline, but a lot of these kids were coming in hungry and tired, and uh, there was this misalignment of how I want to interact with these 7-year-olds and what I had to do for my job.
Hmm. That sounds really difficult to navigate. I can hear all the warring of wanting to be there, wanting to be engaged, needing a certain kind of order, but is this the right kind of order given this kid might have just been couch surfing or whatever it might be at 7, right? So, how long did you last in that environment and how did you navigate it?
Yeah. Um, it was a challenging year. I had at least one panic attack because of the weight of the job.
Yeah.
I was in my early 20s, and I remember this one night I was at a concert. It was a Friday night with some friends, and I was standing up, falling asleep. And I knew then that this couldn't last very long because I was 23. I should be full of energy and excitement, but I was completely exhausted. So I only made it through one school year. I wanted to quit, but everyone encouraged me to keep going. My grandmother taught for almost 30 years. I have a lot of aunts and cousins that are also teachers. So, like, please make it through the year. It's really hard when teachers quit in the middle. So that was useful motivation for me. Like, I had people in my family that got it and could talk to me about it. But yeah, I knew that I would need time at the end of that school year to deal with burnout at 23, 24.
Mhm. So I'm going to ask you maybe a little challenging question here if you want to answer it. It's so interesting when we have people who are on our side, people who love us, and they give us advice from their wisdom, from what they see in their experience. And they only want good things for us and they want good things for others. All well-intentioned, but it's not always the best path for us. So, are you glad that you stuck it out? Or, I mean, burnout, it takes, as you know, a lot to come back from. And
Right.
our mental and physical health is very important. So do you wish you would have listened to yourself and be like, no, my body is telling me I can't do this? How, looking back, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. I think given the context of being my first full-time job, that the desire to really quit came around that first big break, the winter break.
Mhm.
And I think my family could see how much I was struggling, and that if I had left at that time, it would have been really hard to figure out something else. And that there would be this natural pause at the end of the year. I would get better as well at teaching. So I'm glad in that moment I listened to them. I think luckily for me, the household I was raised in was full of my dad's an entrepreneur, my mom's an artist and an art dealer. She's an actress. So the messaging I got growing up was please follow the things that you love and be able to support it through. If you need a day job, go for it. But if you're focusing on what you love, that's gonna bring you through the hardest times. So I didn't feel like I was being pressured to stay, which is great. I think a
Yeah.
lot of the clients I work with feel like they're gonna be letting down everyone in their life if they quit this amazing job on paper.
Right.
Um, but I look back fondly on my perseverance to get through it.
Yeah.
Like as I said a little bit ago, it's still the hardest thing I've ever done.
Mhm.
So when I'm faced with hard things like growing a business or being on a podcast for the first time. I'm like, I've done harder things. I could do this.
Right. It's so interesting when we think about listening to the people that love us, listening to mentors, listening to their advice, and they have a kind of perspective that we don't have, right? And when we have a good support system, of course, a lot of people aren't that lucky. There's still this, when do I listen to my own intuition, right? How do I find that? And since I deal with conflict, our own intuition can be skewed given the pain that we're in, given where we are and what we do need is some coaching, somebody to come in and help us lift up so that we can really figure out what it is. So it's this,
Mm.
I'm a big believer in listening to yourself and really taking that pause. And I just, I think about Job's friends. It's like, we listen to the outside, we listen to the inside, and it's important to have both. And sometimes you're not reliable, right? We really do need to just trust the other. And sometimes the other person, the other people, out of love, just don't really quite get how impactful, how we really do need to have a change, because it's not just a matter of limping through for a few more months. It can be catastrophic. And I mean, there's no straight answer to that, but I suppose to be aware of those dynamics.
Yeah, I think the when you were talking just now, I was thinking about how do we see what like where people are coming from when they're saying these things and where
Mhm,
we're coming from.
mhm,
So, for example, my desire to leave was based on the fear of staying.
mhm,
Like it was rough and I was having a really hard time, but I didn't have much to base it off of because I wasn't in the working world that long as a post-college grad. And I could tell, luckily, that when my family was talking to me about leaving, it was from this place of love. They were checking me to see, like, how bad is it? Because they would never want to put me in harm's way, but they also are happy to challenge me when I'm
Right.
maybe not in my right mind. So
Right.
I think something that I talk to my clients about sometimes is where is this voice coming
Yeah.
from? Is it from a place of fear? Is it from a place of love? Because it helps kind of break through what's actually being said, the content, and allows us to see, well, which part of you do you want to follow? Do you want to follow the fear or do you want to follow the love?
Yeah, that's really good advice. Because when we are in toxic environments or whatever it is that's not going well for us, it's very hard to figure out. We know something is wrong, something is really wrong, but what precisely is it? And what do we want? Like, what do we want? And we're in pain, but getting out of pain is also painful, right? So what hard do we want to pursue or maintain? And having somebody to help us look at the lay of the land and see and imagine what could be next or what may continue, and then making informed choices based on that. So you
Yeah.
leave teaching, you get this really, really good education in the teaching, right? And this piece that you can look back on. Where did you go after that?
My dad, who's been an entrepreneur his whole career, saw that I was pretty miserable and was a few years into a new business and said, "Ben, why don't you come work with me?" I said, "Oh my God, yes, thank you. I'll do anything." I really didn't know what I wanted,
Yeah.
but I knew I needed a change. So after taking the summer off, which I think was really helpful in retrospect and something I try to talk to people I work with a lot about having space away from these bad environments to heal. I started working with my dad and I saw what are the ins and outs of growing a business? How do you meet the right people? What are the things you need to read and be thinking about and working on to actually grow something? And I loved that. I loved the autonomy, the flexibility, the camaraderie with my dad, and what a sweet experience to actually be colleagues with someone I saw build his own businesses throughout my life. What I realized working with him after half a year or so was, wow, I really miss what I got from teaching as far as helping people grow and develop. So at that point, I was thinking to myself, entrepreneur, growth and development, where do these two really meet?
Mhm.
And I started talking to social workers, therapists, guidance counselors, like maybe that's the lane I should be going down. And everyone said, Ben, you're gonna need to go back to school, get this certification, jump through that hoop. I was like, I don't want to do any more schooling. I don't really want to jump through these hoops. I feel like I have something to offer right now. I'm just not quite sure what.
Mhm.
And the turning point there, it was 2015, and I was talking to this person who was both a therapist and a coach and had never met before, just a casual phone conversation, no skin in the game for her.
Mhm.
And in the middle, she stops me and she says, Ben, it sounds like you want to be a coach.
Mhm.
Whoa, what does that mean? Like, I've played soccer my whole life. I've had coaches. What is a life coach? What is a career coach? And that really kicked off this journey that I'm still on today of being a coach, which I can definitely tell you more about.
Yeah. I've heard some of this uncertainty, like what major you chose, what you did afterwards, and then after the post-teaching, going in with your father and just trying to find. I think so many young people find themselves in this position where maybe their friend knows they know they want to be a lawyer, they know they want to be a teacher, they know they want to be a physical therapist or whatever, go into sports medicine. And then, but actually, many people don't really know what that is, and it can feel so disconcerting because because of all the different pressures. We want to be gainfully employed. We want to be adults in the world. That means we pay our own bills, and we have this direction and this growth that we're going towards. But what are we going towards? It can be really disorienting when, as you say, you have something to give, but what precisely is that? And what a gift she gave you to look at you. Of course, she didn't have to say that, but see it in you and then name it.
Yeah. Yeah, it was I have like a string of moments like that that are just groundbreaking for me in that it was again from this place of love. There was no need to say anything and guide me in a particular direction beyond what she was seeing in me. And I think to what you were saying, what makes it so hard, especially in the US, for people who are post grad or maybe didn't even go to college, is there isn't a ton of support around the experimentation. Like, how do you actually use the things that are just interest and try them out without having to commit to a whole path, like teaching, for example?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So tell us about this journey you've been on for over 10 years.
Yeah. So picking up where I left off in that conversation with this therapist and coach, I did what I knew how to do, which was, okay, let me find all the coaches I can of every different type and just talk to them, see what they're up to, what they do. This is something I'm so glad I did back then because I teach it so often to clients, which is to get this understanding of other paths, talk to the people that are doing it and don't feel like you have to become a teacher, a doctor, an artist before really experimenting with it and talking to people on the ground. So I spent a few months just talking to all the coaches I could find, and my interest just kept building. So much so that I thought to myself, how could I enter this career? Like I want to have some training
Mhm.
and let me see if I could find a program that trains people to be coaches. Maybe it's certified by some national body, which is the International Coaching Federation, ICF. And I found only one program that would allow me to be a fly on the wall for a few hours and just see a few hours of the program.
Mm.
So this was July of 2015. I was in a basement conference room of a hotel in Manhattan. It was month 6 of 12 of this program, and I was blown away. It was like a jaw-dropping moment. I couldn't believe the conversation, the vulnerability. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it now.
Mm.
People were being so real, and I thought, I can't believe this is what these folks get to do as a profession.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, I signed up for the 2016 year-long training. It was also in this big transition time in my life where I moved from New York to St. Louis for love. I saw that you taught in St. Louis and
Yep.
lived there for a bit.
Yep.
So my program was up in Chicago, and I was traveling a weekend every month from St. Louis to Chicago for this program in 2016. And I started my business as soon as I could and started coaching people back then.
It's so wonderful. I mean, I could just see it all over your face. And when you find the thing, right? When you, I know that resonates with me. I've had several of those sorts of epiphanies. One was in college when I came across philosophy, and it was like this aha, like I'd always had a philosophical disposition. I had never really heard of philosophy. And then I was like, oh, this is what you can do. And then when I was transitioning out of teaching and I read, and I knew I wanted to do mediation, but then I read David Little's book about workplace conflict resolution. And it was like, no, 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 that is what I want to do. Specifically
Mm.
that. I want to help people who are caught in conflict solve it, reduce it, empower them that it doesn't need to happen. And it was like, yeah, that thing. And it's and I wonder if, if somebody's listening and thinking, well, how do I find that thing? I want to find that thing. One thing, Ben, that I've heard through everything that you've saying is this spirit of curiosity, right? Looking, wanting, seeking. And if you decide we can put our attention anywhere we want it, and if you want to find the thing, tell the
Mm.
universe, open yourself, start looking as start asking people, right? Shadowing, and it is that curiosity. But if we do the same thing over and over, we're going to get the same kinds of results. But it is a turn of, well, what do I want? And then you start looking up to find it.
Right. I think in the work that I do, what's so challenging is the folks who are in these kind of toxic, bad fit environments, is there's not a lot of headspace to have that curiosity.
Hmm.
If you're working 45, 50, 60 plus hours in a week and you don't feel aligned with the place you're at and the work you're doing,
Yeah.
it's almost impossible for those people to really hear that internal voice that's shouting about their curiosity, the things that they loved when they were in college or as a kid. I want to just share one quick story about that, if that's all right.
Please.
Um,
Yeah.
I have a former client who was an engineering manager, was in software engineering for 15, 20 years, and was pretty unhappy with her company. It was in a moment that I found her where she wasn't being really listened to anymore. And she was managing a big team of software engineers and really guiding the ship of that team and had a ton of expertise, a ton of on the ground knowledge about what was happening, what would be helpful for the company and not. And it got to the point where she was fed up. The challenge was she was scared to leave. One of the things I deal with a lot in my work is people's financial concerns.
Yeah.
In this country, specifically in the US, there's not a ton of safety nets if you just up and leave.
Right.
Part of the group of people that I found that I work well with is that they've done an awesome job in their careers in saving, investing, like having great salaries to be able to be okay. So for this client, let's call her Kate. Kate was miserable and wanted to leave, but didn't think she could.
Mm.
And one of the things I do with most people that I work with is, okay, well, let's get down to the brass tacks. Like, what is your actual runway? If you got fired right now, how
Mhm.
long would you be okay for? And it didn't take her very long to realize that between her and her partner, they'd be fine maybe for the rest of their lives with how much they've saved and invested, and her partner was working still. So she could feasibly quit and everything would be okay. And I helped kind of guide her through that process. And the most beautiful thing happened in leaving, which was she reconnected with what she loved. And it didn't take very long for me to help her through encouragement figure out how to spend time. She started playing guitar again, and she played a lot of flamenco guitar and started performing,
Mm.
which was something that was really harrowing for her. She's like, I don't know if I could perform in front of people. I'm like, I think you can. You're pretty awesome. And started to volunteer at her children's middle school once a week and thought about maybe being a substitute. Because unlike me, she loved working with these students. It was like really life-giving and profound for her. And what ended up happening is she got a contract to be an engineer again, much lower lift and on her own schedule, and still was volunteering at this school. But the through line was because she had left this space that was really clouding her brain and not allowing her energy to go elsewhere. When she left, she could remember who she was and
Yeah.
what she loved, and that could be the North Star again.
Mm. That's such a wonderful story. And there's a lot in there. And of course, almost everybody's concerned with their financial situation. I know many
Yeah.
people that I talk to who are in terrible circumstances would have left if they could afford it. And so then the good question is, well, can I afford it? And I know that you've got what's my runway, which is a spreadsheet that helps you, along with other things, it helps you figure out, okay, well, let's look at it. Because as with this woman's story, we tell ourselves, I can't do it. And well, can you? And I would want to say, because a lot of the people that I work with are not in that person's position, and
Sure.
they may not be able to right now, but if that's a goal, how do you get there? What's your what's your year exit plan? What's your 3-year exit plan? And I find that when people who are really in bad circumstances, and those bad circumstances, there's so many different possible things that could be going on. Once you've made that turn, and once you see, oh, this is not the rest of my life. These power dynamics, this boss, this person, this situation, this market, this work, I have this light at the end of the tunnel. And now all of a sudden I've taken myself out. And so now I'm working towards financially so that I can do the next thing. And maybe I am reskilling myself. But I think you made a really excellent point to my sort of curiosity. Well, yeah, of course. But when you're beaten down, when you are ruminating over either bad treatment or just exhaustion because the work has sucked so much out of you, I mean, yeah, you need to do that. But how do you realistically do that? And I think you do that. We need help. All of us need help, but it's small steps.
Definitely. A big part of the work I've been doing this past year, which is new as far as its focus, is helping people specifically in quitting these toxic jobs. And not everyone I work with quits.
Mhm.
And part of starting with this idea of, hey, you can quit your job is most people I've ever even talked to will disregard it out of hand as an option. Nope, can't quit. I need the next job lined up first. Nope, can't quit. Don't have the finances, can't afford it. All these objections, which sometimes you're right. Like, yeah, you cannot quit.
Right.
But with the idea that, like you were just saying, they could create a plan with someone like me to quit down the road, have the savings to do it, create the runway to do it, it starts changing people's relationship to the job itself.
Yeah.
And some of the things uh, that I bring up with people, like, hey, what's having you work 60 hours a week? Do you have to? Is that part of your contract? I see that you are answering these emails on a Sunday. Is that helpful for you? What is your responsibility in this two-way street of employer-employee that we actually have some control over?
Yeah.
And with the idea that they could leave, they start questioning some of that. Oh, you know what? I was working more than I needed to because I'm afraid to do a bad job, or I want to make sure I'm not fired. And that fear just gets tamed a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting question that you said before, are you acting out of fear or love? Like, which one are you going to go towards? And I think it's a really good question to consider. What kind of choices am I making if it's run out of fear, right? If I'm afraid of, versus what kind of choices am I making if I want to live the best possible life, you know? And that reframing, right? Your concrete circumstances might not have changed, but what I love about conflict management is that it is always first and foremost about personal empowerment. You don't need anybody else to change for there to be a change, right? And once you start seeing that you have choices, even though you've said you don't have choices, you have choices to think about staying in that circumstance. Even if you think, being a responsible person, I'm carrying the insurance of the family, I cannot quit. Okay, well, that is a choice, and that's a very reasonable choice for some people. But even within there are lots of options. And in fact, the only options we ever really have is how we decide to think about circumstances, how we decide to say we're stuck, how we decide to say that person's annoying or that person, whatever it might be, right? This is not saying that people aren't, bullies, or that there aren't abuses of power or bad organizations and systems. Of course there are. But the question is, what do we do next, right? The path is not
Yep.
set. And so working with someone like you, starting to have these sorts of narratives about what is it that I want can help retool. Well, what am I doing? Do I need to do it? What can I do differently?
Yeah, I love all of what you just said because it's oftentimes the perspective that we have about what's happening that causes us so
Yes.
much of that internal suffering and the conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah, my boss is maybe a little bit of a jerk. Well, have you asked about their family? Have you gotten curious about what's going on in their life? Have you set up boundaries around your work schedule? Like, what are the ways in which you could start to shift how you're seeing what's going on and give people the benefit of the doubt? Um, Maybe your boss just had a baby and is really stressed and has to take care of 10 direct reports, including you, and is at their wits' end and they don't know what to do. And they could use your help and you could step up and maybe through that change, you start to really love your job again and the work you're doing because your relationships change. And again, like you said, it's because you've been changing inside.
I also think, people get really harmed. They get wronged at work. They do. People do get wronged at
Definitely.
work. Absolutely. And then they follow what they think is correct procedure, but then they're seen as the problem, and it compounds, and maybe there's some retaliation, and this narrative can build and build. And you find them later and they're holding on to this, but I was right. I was right. All these things happened to me. The question is still, but what do you want tomorrow? Right?
Yeah.
What absolutely. If somebody says they're in pain, someone says they're wrong, I'm never, that's just not my role. I don't say I'm not an investigator in that, I'm not an arbitrator. But the question is, all of those things true, what next? Do you want to
Yes.
keep on, and I reticent to say playing the victim, but in a way it is this retelling. How is that helping you? What are you getting? Because guess what? Those other people don't even remember it. They don't remember that a year ago, 5 years ago, they're doing something else. You're
Hmm.
hurting yourself. So this is not about not having people take responsibility, but it's about realizing and accepting reality. Like this is the real. Let's suppose they're not going to apologize. Okay, what next? Let's suppose the system's not going to change. What next? What do you want to do next? How is this serving you? Is there a better use of your time? If you let it go, what does that really mean in this instance, letting it go? Who are you letting off the hook? It's probably yourself, right?
Yeah,
What what does that look like? And that is really tough. It's really tough when somebody has harmed you to move on. But the question is again, what kind of life? What's the quality of your life? What do you want tomorrow?
definitely. It makes me think of a client that I worked with who, let's call him Mark, was working at a major news corporation. He was a principal engineer, software engineer, and had been there for 7 years and had done amazing work in building out their online presence, their infrastructure, with not a lot of resources. And I remember when we started working together, there was a lot of pent up anger and just negative emotions about how he was treated by leadership.
Yeah.
And he was in a place where he had just left this role and didn't know what he wanted next. And I think he was still holding on to the way in which he was impacted by the decisions that leadership made that kind of forced him to leave. And when I started working with him, he was on this path to, in my opinion, repeat the same patterns at a new job. He didn't really have that fine microscope on his own behavior and actions. So he was in an interview process with a company he didn't really care about because he felt like this is what you do now. You find a new job, you apply, you talk to your network. And through our work together, I was asking him questions like, "Hey, what is it that you really love about the work you've done?" And had him go back and look at this 7 year chunk and before that, 12-year chunk of work at two different places. Like, hey, let's pull out the themes of the things you really liked and the things you didn't, because there's definitely ways in which you weren't treated right. But as you were saying earlier, like we have to focus on what you want next.
Mhm.
And the more that you're going to be clear on that, Mark, the easier it is that you're going to find it because you're going to know how to talk about it and it's
Mhm.
going to light you up.
Mhm.
So through that process, luckily he didn't get that job offer and I don't think he would have taken it anyway. We got crystal clear on the fact that he loves building out infrastructure. He's an infrastructure enthusiast as a software engineer. And he started, instead of just applying and networking, he started really using the relationships he's already built to deepen them and to talk to people about what they were up to and not look for a job, but just create relationships and plant those seeds with people. And it was through that process that he talked to someone who happened to be building a company and was a few years in and really wanted him to be the chief technology officer, the CTO. And they ended up working it out where through a bunch of contracts as he was fundraising, Mark would become the CTO of this company. And he said, Ben, I would have never thought I could, one, get a job like this without applying, and two, like actually find something that lights me up, um, because I just was so focused on having a job again.
Hmm. So, what advice do you have for someone who has decided? I like that you said that, not everybody who feels like they're in a toxic environment leaves. And I'm a
Right.
big proponent of fix it if you can. Because the next
Yeah.
place you go, no place is, we're on this side, and so every place is going to have its issues, some more than others. But can you fix it? What can you do where you're at, right? But sometimes it's just not feasible at this time with this, whatever's going on. So somebody wants to look for a job. And what a lot of people do is they just start throwing their resume out there. What do you think is the best or a great strategy for the next thing?
I think there's people who find themselves of one of two camps when they're getting to that moment. One is they realize they need to leave. They they can't do it anymore, and through our work, they figured out I'll be okay for 12 months. I'll be fine. I can leave, and I've got the support of my significant other. We'll be okay, and I'm gonna take that path so I can have my time back and really reconnect with what it is I want and figure out how to move forward to my next role like that. And then there's other people who I've also worked with who say, Ben, I honestly can't leave. I don't have that many months if I left. I got the mortgage, I've got my kids going to college. I can't leave. So depending on which camp people are in, there's really different strategy. For the people that say, Ben, I can't leave, I need to stay here, you still will not benefit by just putting out a ton of applications and networking, hoping you could leave. Because oftentimes, when people want to leave like that, they're leaving out of fear. Get me away from this. And they haven't created the thing that they want to run towards. They're just
Mm,
leaving this thing. And I've seen it too many times, unfortunately, that when those folks run away from this thing because they're miserable, they end up recreating the
yeah.
same dynamic in
Hmm.
whatever's next. So for those folks, I often say, okay, we can do this. We're going to be threading the needle because your job currently takes up a ton of your time and psychology. Like it's not giving you the space to dream about what you want. So what we have to focus on first is changing your relationship to what's happening, changing your perspective. What are the conflicts that are happening that you do have some influence over? Whether it's maybe you don't have, maybe you're a people pleaser and you have to learn how to delegate a little bit more and ask for help. And hey, if it's not you that gets it done, the world's not going to end. And you might actually find that it gets done better with that type of help. So, in changing people's relationship to their job, space starts to open up. And as we were talking about earlier, if that person and I have created this kind of plan to quit, maybe in a year, they can see that light. And they're like, okay, I can figure out in this year the things that I really love about what I do. And wow, I mean, 2 jobs ago, I was doing this type of work and I miss it. Like I really loved working with the students in that way. And like, how do I put these two things together?
Hmm.
And we start experimenting. And I'll say what unites every type of person that I work with in figuring out what's next is this spirit of experimentation. How can we create these really low bar, low intensity, not a ton of your time or energy experiments where you can see, hey, I've always been interested in interior design. Okay, how do we get you into that world without having a new job?
Hmm.
I had a client who was a anesthesiologist who thought maybe she wanted to be a interior designer. And the experiment we ran was really interesting. She flew from Arizona to Texas to be with her friend's daughter, who was an interior designer, and just shadowed her for a few days. And she came back and we talked, and she said, "Yep, I don't want to do that. Like, we can check it off."
That's
I
great.
was like,
That is
"Really? That's
great.
amazing."
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, sometimes all it takes is
Hmm.
seeing the nitty-gritty of a
Yeah.
particular path and it clicks. And that checking something off the list
Mm.
is just as important as finding the thing that you actually want.
I 100% agree. I mean, how do we get it when we've got the whole pool of anything in the world, right? Well, I think it's this. Okay, well, try it. If it's not, check it off. And I love this idea of low stakes. How do we do that? And I think that the more experiences that we accumulate, whatever she ends up doing the next, she actually has this new bit of knowledge and about herself and about another world. And everything is useful, and definitely knowledge, self-knowledge can come about by knowing what something isn't. That is so very helpful.
Definitely.
So, Ben, what about yourself? How do you deal with conflict? So, if you think back to your younger self versus where you are
Hmm.
right now, how do you tend to deal with conflict and has it changed?
I think I was much more conflict avoidant when I was growing up. Like if I saw my one of my parents getting angry or upset, I would have a hard time dealing with it and maybe slink away or try to solve the problem. And I'll credit some really great therapists in my life and relationships I've had to help me see that sometimes people just need to feel whatever they're feeling, and there's not a problem to solve.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, what's most helpful is just being there with somebody.
Mhm.
I think the way in which I deal with conflict now, I'll give a shout out to my partner. She's been an amazing um, not lesson, but she's helped me really understand how do I work with someone who has a really different disposition to dealing with conflict. So for example, with her, when we're in a really heated moment, sometimes she'll just need space. I'm a verbal processor. I want to like talk it through and try to come to a solution, and she needs to back away, maybe not be in the same room, not really talk. And then we can reconvene. And her love language is touch. So, like a little pat on the back or a rub once we've had that space. And she's like back to normal. And I'm like, what changed? She's like, I got space. And for me, I'm like, okay, can we talk about it now? So really knowing like what does this person that I'm talking to
Mm,
need? And if
yeah,
I don't know, actually asking like, hey, I'm not sure what to do. This is how I'm thinking could be useful for you, but could you help me help you? Help
yeah.
the situation.
That is such a wonderful example because so many times when we're in conflict with somebody else, we just assume, well, this is how you do conflict, right? And that everybody does it. And if they're not doing it the way that we are, then it means something else, right? So she's running away, she's avoiding you, she doesn't want to talk about it, she's shutting you down, she doesn't care, whatever narrative we spin. It's the same thing at work, right? So we
Mm,
assume that people deal with conflict the way that we do. So whether or not we are more competitive and we want to get it done right now, whether or not we are more avoidant, whether we're a compromiser, whatever it might be, we have these different kind of temperaments. And if we take a pause and ask, what's going on with them? Why are they responding in this way? I mean, I think at work or any kind of relationship is we know we're going to have conflict. Conflict is not the problem, it's unmanaged conflict. We've had it before. We might be in it
mm,
right now. We will have in the future. And I think the best time to talk about conflict styles and how we're going to deal with problems and mistakes is before we're in it, right? We
yeah.
know we're going to have it. People are going to make mistakes. I know I will, I have, and I will in the future, and everybody else here too will. We will disagree with one another, and we should. There's a problem if we're not disagreeing. How are we going to disagree well? And that requires a little bit of work up front, but it pays, right? If this, then that, how are we going to do it? And then we revisit it, constantly revisiting it, because sometimes we'll set up a norm for the people who were here 3 years ago, and most of those people are gone, and times have changed, right? So setting those norms about how to disagree well, I think is very important.
Yeah, and I think it's a great sign of a healthy workplace
Mm,
where when people are entering into that workplace for the first time, they're being given the kind of roadmap of
yeah.
how do people interact here? What works well, what doesn't, and being asked about themselves like, hey, how do you learn? How do you deal with conflict? What's going to be really useful? What's going to be really harmful for you? And I've had that a couple times in my life where I was asked questions like that, and it kind of blew me away that
Mm,
people were so in tune with like how do we run this really complex ship of an organization, because you're right, there's going to be conflict. We're going to disagree, but there are ways we can do it that are healthy, and there are ways that are pretty unhealthy that are more normal for people.
Yeah. And I think that's right. It's these defaults that if we don't want to do that, we want something else, it's going to take sustained intentional effort to figure out what that something else is, to do it in a healthy way, and to get that habit. But it is a habit that has to be maintained to have this. I am talking about this year on Conflict Manage. I'm very interested in generational differences at work. Like, how do we work well together in multi-generational offices? What, do you have any advice? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a big topic these days. I think there's this pretty big divide of digital natives versus non-natives. So people who grew up with technology, they've not known a time outside of the internet and iPhones and laptops, and people that do. And I think one of the biggest challenges I've been seeing in the past 5 years, in particular, like post-COVID, is that younger folks who are entering the workforce don't really have, um, especially if they're remote, don't have this connection to mentorship and to how to be in a workplace and feel like they're really contributing. And I think one of the biggest challenges, and I think especially with the type of people I work with who are in software engineering, is like, how do we um, bring up the next group of people who love this type of work? How do we really train them and have roles for them, quite honestly? And I think one of the best ways I've seen this happen is through um, internships and programs that allow people to have mentorship built in. I
Mhm.
think there's this huge need for young people these days to have people who've been in their field really show them the ropes,
Mhm.
but also get paid in the process.
Right.
Um, so that would be that's something I'm thinking about a lot, which is how can organizations implement these types of programs where people who are earlier in their careers can just have this intentional mentorship and be shown the ropes, knowing that they're not going to know the ins and outs of how to do this work, but being taught as they're doing their job.
And it just reminds me of how work has been done, prior to the Industrial Revolution, which is apprenticeship and guilds, right? And so
Yes.
how do we expect people to be, to really get this and to understand the ins and outs and, as you said, the love of the field? Well, you have the master, somebody who's really done it. I think it is interesting in this day of technology in the sense that, think about guilds back in the day, there's not much innovation, right? So things
Mm.
are the same. And so I'm really interested and I'm ombuds for the university here in my town, and I'm working on a mentoring and reverse mentoring program. So because of the reality of the workplace today, we need both. We need people who've been in the field for a long time to understand their younger colleagues and so much of what they value and what they bring instead of the tired narratives that are spun about young people. But then the younger generations also need to know the lay of the land of work and all of these kinds of things and trying to pair people together in this real fruitful generative process so that the outcome is that we have healthy work environments, engagement, and you know being a good colleague and being collegial.
Yeah. And I think that that kind of type of intergenerational learning
Hmm.
is is sorely lacking today, where,
Hmm.
people are not living intergenerationally as much,
Right, right.
and people don't have intergenerational friendships or relationships really. So
Hmm.
programs like that are so special, I feel, because both everyone wins.
Yeah.
The things that you learn as a young person from someone who's been doing this for a while groundbreaking for your career. And then the folks who are deeper into their careers are going to have this more bright-eyed, full energy type of experience of maybe seeing the work they've done in a completely new way.
Yeah, absolutely. So my last question for you is, as we look into the future of work, what do you think needs to happen so that not only will all workers be treated with dignity and respect, but that people will be able to thrive and flourish?
I think I think we already have the solutions. They just haven't been implemented yet. I was thinking about this a lot in terms of what makes the United States a little bit different. And a couple of the things that I think would just be groundbreaking here is 4-day work weeks
Yeah.
where people are working 32 hours, um, where they have regular sabbaticals every year, like a month off,
Mhm.
and where everyone, if they're working that full-time schedule, has all their basic needs met. They have housing, food, security. And I think about countries specifically in Western Europe where they've got 4-day work weeks. Um, if you go in the month of August, a lot of people are not going to be working that full month. And I think about, for example, restaurant workers in a lot of these places. They don't have tipping because that restaurant's paying them a living wage.
Mhm.
And I think all these things already existing in other places.
Mhm.
And there's been some innovation in the US. I've seen some companies try out, for example, the 4-day work week and to great success found that
Yeah.
people are just as productive and happier.
Mhm.
Um, we have all the tools. I think what we really need is the motivation from uh, the executives and the um, people that are running these big corporations and small to to take the leap and make sure that they're treating everyone really well.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. All the studies that come out that you see about the 4-day work week and any study about treating people well, right? You know, when you treat, if you want people, if you want longevity, if you want engagement and belonging, if you want innovation, treat your people well. Okay, well, what does that look like? Well, what do the people want? Everything that you've just mentioned. Well, Ben, thank
Definitely.
you so much. And so if you want to know more about Ben and what's my runway and a free coaching call with him, how would people find you?
Yeah, if you go on benfoxcoaching.kit.com, again, that's benfoxcoaching.kit.com, you can grab this free resource and I'll see it, send you a message, and we can have a deep dive into figuring out your runway and your next steps with your job.
That's wonderful. Well, Ben, thank you so much. I really
Thanks, Mary.
enjoyed our conversation together.
Me too.
Ben, thank you. I say this every time after I have a conversation, but I really did enjoy our conversation. You were absolutely delightful to speak with and so reflective and I could just feel and see the light that you have for helping others and all the good work it's doing. I appreciate that so much. We need more care in the world. How can we care for each other and help people find real practical solutions to their real problems? So thank you, Ben, for that. And I encourage you all to go out and find more out about Ben Fox and what he's got going on. And if you need any help, I'm sure he would be happy to help you out. Conflict Managed is produced by Third Party Workplace Conflict Restoration Services and hosted by me, Mary Brown. You can find us online at 3pconflictrestoration.com. Come back. We have new episodes every Tuesday. And if you would like and subscribe wherever you are listening or watching this show, it is greatly appreciated. If you haven't had a chance to check out my newest book, gosh, you can't really see it there. Well, it's called Winning the Generation Wars at Work, Making Your Age an Asset. How do we have these multi-generational environments that benefit everybody there, our teams, our organization, and our communities? Our music is courtesy of Dove Pilot. And remember, conflict is normal and expected. Let's deal with it. Until next time, take care.